Today we begin talking about the integumentary system. Consists of the skin, the hair, and the nails. Now, what are the functions of the skin? The skin has 6 major functions. The first one is protection. The skin does not permit significant amounts of substances like water and air to enter and exit the body. So the first function is protection. Sensation. What we mean by that is the skin contains nerve receptors for touch, for pressure, for temperature, and for pain. Our skin also functions in temperature regulation. The amount of blood that is being carried to the surface of the skin, like in the capillaries, when your skin turns pink, is regulated to control the amount of heat lost to the environment. So when the skin has a lot of blood close to the surface, it gets on a reddish appearance and it's trying to expel extra heat. When you get cold, it decreases the blood flow to the surface so that we don't lose as much heat. Excretion. There's a small amount of body waste that is excreted as sweat. So it's not our main excretory system, but it helps with that. Then vitamin D manufacturing. The skin produces a small amount of vitamin D, which is necessary for our body to be able to absorb calcium and to properly develop bones and teeth. And then our skin functions in absorption. It absorbs some chemicals, a few drugs, and a small amount of oxygen. Some drugs are actually administered by applying a little patch to the skin or something like that. So here's a diagram, a cross-section of the skin. And you can see that at the top we'll have the epidermis, which is thinner. Then right below that we'll have the dermis, and below that is the subcutaneous layer. So those are the 3 parts of the skin. Now the epidermis is the outermost layer of the skin, and the epidermis is made entirely of layers of epithelial cells. You can see how they kind of like all stack on top of one another. So they're all made of epithelial tissue. You can see that at the top, as it looks a little bit different from the layers below that. So we have the epidermis at the top. Now, below that, the deepest layer of the epidermis is called the stratum germinativium. They call the basal layer. This single layer, cell layer, carries on cell division and produces new cells, so that when we slough off cells on the outside of our skin, this produces the new ones. And the older cells of the epidermis are filled with a keratin, which is just a waxy protein that fills these outer cells, and then the cells will die. And these dead cells that are form the outer layer of the epidermis, the ones that we flake off, and it's called stratum corneum. So what are some disorders of the skin? Well, all of you probably have had a sunburn, and you've probably seen blisters forming over your skin when the UV has damaged the skin, and your body is responding in this way to that. Another thing would be like calluses on the left. We often have calluses when a portion of the skin has experiences a lot of friction or something like that. Then our body will add extra epithelial cells there. And then there's also the corn, which often starts from something irritating the skin and then it producing, but it's a lot smaller area than a callus and often quite a bit more painful. Now the dermis is the next deeper layer in the skin, and it's also thicker than the epidermis. And the dermis is composed primarily of connective tissue, um, and there are blood vessels and nerve endings and sweat glands and hair follicles and oil glands that all make up this layer. So here's our diagram again. There's our epidermis, and this is the part of is the dermis, and you can see the little red lines and blue lines are the blood vessels that make up this layer. Uh, you can see a hair growing out of the skin and then the little white coiled thing on the right is would be like our oil glands that. So underneath that is that subcutaneous layer. The subcutaneous layer is not actually part of the skin. It's actually a portion of the integumentary system that attaches the dermis, that's the thickest layer that we just talked about, to the underlying muscle, and it's composed of connective tissue that attaches the two together. So, now, here are, when we talk about burns to the skin, a first degree burn is only damages the outermost layer. So only the epidermis is affected. A second degree burn would affect deeper than that, down to the dermis. So the epidermis and into the dermis would be a second degree burn. And in a third degree burn where all the dermis and the epidermis and down into the subcutaneous, so in other words your skin is pretty well damaged in that area. They would maybe have to do skin grafts and stuff like that in this situation. Okay, so let's talk about hair, which is another part of our integumentary system. The hairs are located all over the body except in the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet. Otherwise, you kind of pretty much have hair everywhere else on your body. And the hair is made up of a shaft. That's the part that sticks out of the skin, is called the shaft of the hair. The hair follicle is the little depression into the skin where the hair is grown and then extends out through your skin. So it's the shaft of the hair is the visible portion. The part inside your skin is the hair follicle. And the hair is actually dead. It's made up of keratin-filled cells, so that way you don't feel anything when you when you cut on it. And the quality of the hair that you have on your body depends on your diet, and certain hormones will affect whether you have more or less hair, and your health. And then with age, you probably noticed elderly people begin losing their hair. They have fewer hair on their body than they did when they were much younger. So here is a micrograph of this, like a cross section of the skin. You can see the hair follicle down here at the bottom, and then the rest of the the hair would go out through that opening that you can see right there. That's where the hair would stick out of. So that's where it'd grow in that direction. Okay, now another part of the dermis, there are also erector muscles, and you can see in the diagram in the upper left-hand corner of the diagram, there is the word erector muscle. It runs kind of at an angle to the hair follicle, and when this muscle contracts, it makes your hair stand on end, and that's what causes you to have goosebumps. So that muscle just contracts. And the nails of the fingers and toes are very similar to the hair since they actually develop from the skin, and the visible portion is just composed of dead cells filled with keratin. Now, also part of the skin are the exocrine glands, and there's actually two kinds of those, and the exocrine glands secrete through little ducts on the surface of the skin. There's actually two types, as I said. The first one is the sebaceous gland, and it produces sebum, and the sebum is just like an oil, and it's usually connected to the hair follicle by ducts, so it kind of keeps your hair more oily looking. And so the sebum helps keep the hair and the skin soft, and it keeps your skin from drying out. And then we also have sweat glands. There are about 150 to 300 sweat glands, it says, per square centimeter of skin. And these tubes shaped glands just produce perspiration. And your perspiration is about 99% water. There's a small amount of like salt in it. If you've ever noticed that your perspiration tastes salty. The sweat production has two primary functions. One is to eliminate waste, but the main thing that you're probably focused with would be temperature control, when you sweat to help cool your body. So the sebaceous gland produces oil. It keeps the hair and the skin soft. And now when when it gets dirty and bacteria inside there, that is what causes acne. So it's just this gland, and the bacteria are growing on the oil. So keeping it clean is one of the ways of avoiding that. So here's our hair follicle, and then on either side of it is where the sebaceous glands are, and they are the ones that produce the oil that will then oil the hair and then come out on the body to keep the rest of the body warm, moist and soft. So we have lots of sweat glands. They produce perspiration, 99% water, and the other 1% are salts, and then there are some other things that are in your perspiration as well: sugars, amino acids, and urea. Normally, your body puts out about a half pint of water per day. So even though it might be cool out, you're still are perspiring a little bit. That's just totally normal. But if you're exercising strenuously, uh, then your body can lose up to 2 gallons of water a day. It's one of the reasons why your coach may require you to drink plenty of fluids during the school day before you go to practice, because you're going to lose that. We don't want you to become dehydrated and experience other physical difficulties that are associated with that.